Okie dokes. Well, again, thanks so much for joining this morning, everyone. I know it's a little bit of a commitment to get up for 8 o'clock or join a call at 8 o'clock. But in case you haven't been before, 5Things is a morning meetup where 3 speakers, one tick, I'm just going to admit people as well. I'm bad at driving and speaking at the same time. Where 3 speakers share 5 key takeaways from one of their favorite non-fiction books. So I kind of hope that you'll leave this hour, a little bit smarter, inspired to pick up one of the books we talk about today, or just, maybe feeling just a spot better about life. Who knows? A few bits of housekeeping before we go. So this event is being recorded, though you won't appear unless you contribute. And please stay muted whilst the speakers are on. That'd be great, but feel free to unmute at the end and shout, cry, whatever sort of feels appropriate at the time. And we'll have time at the end to ask the speakers some questions. So if a question pops into your head whilst listening, just pop that straight into the chat, and we'll hopefully explore that right at the end. Just as a reminder, please do ask questions, but the speakers, they aren't subject matters, although Danae is like hopefully becoming a domain master expert on fungi. But yeah, if you can ask questions about the book, that'd be really helpful. So last time on 5Things, which was a couple of months ago, Lauren talked about how to avoid a climate disaster, Nathan about his 100-year life, and Antoinette shared her key takeaways from the gift. Don't know if anyone was there. It was quite a gut-wrenching session, actually. I think I'm still in recovery from it. But if you want to check that out, it's pinned to the top of the 5Things Twitter account. And this is the 14th 5Things. So we've managed to get through quite a lot of books. That's 42 of them to be precise, which equates to 210 things. So I'll try and memorize them one day and play them back. That'd be fun. And obviously we've had some wonderful speakers along the way. I love looking at that slide. Some wonderful people there. And as always, I'm delighted to add 2 brand new speakers to this distinguished group and 1 returning speaker. So if we give a big 5Things welcome to Aleks, Wruk, Danae, Shell, and Sathpal Singh.
Hello. Hello, everyone.
Okay. So first up, we've got Aleks, and Aleks is a thinker and a user advocate. Her geeky tendencies of love of learning and about everything and anything has led her to pick up a career in UX research, and I believe like starting a PhD in artificial intelligence as well, which is very exciting. She's worked for some of Scotland's top tech companies, building bridges between teams of designers and developers and users. I've been lucky enough to work with Aleks for a few years as well. Today, Aleks will likely leave us petrified of the oncoming AI revolution, is that right? By sharing her key takeaways from the Atlas of AI. Aleks.
So hello, everyone. Yeah, hopefully you won't leave petrified but educated. That's the aim of that, because I think this book has been very eye-opening for me when I was thinking about technology and artificial intelligence. I think I've never quite realized how it really is. So that book was, really eye-opening. So, and I think it's important to be educated about those things, given they're gonna rule the world. So let me get started. So I'm Aleks. Yeah, as Andy very kindly introduced me, I've been working in technology and also on some of AI projects for the last 7 years. And the book I'm talking today about is The Atlas of AI, written by Kate Crawford. So Kate Crawford, she's a scholar, but also head of research at Microsoft. And of course, she's, really interested in the artificial intelligence and the kind of impact it kind of have on our world. So on the next slide, you see the book talks about how artificial intelligence impacts the issues of environment, labor, and justice, as well as our everyday lives. So yeah, let's get started with my 5 takeaways. So IA is here and now. Despite me working as an expert in the tech and working on artificial intelligence projects, so I recently worked at Amazon on a HR system that kind of aimed to drive employee performance. I had a very kind of futuristic vision of technology and artificial intelligence with sentient machines, self-driving cars, all this kind of fantastic technology of the future. But in fact, artificial intelligence is here and now. It's in the kind of recommendations of books we see on Amazon. It's the media we consume on social media. It's in our music choices, the news we see. It's really everywhere around us. And I think I didn't quite grasp it until I started reading this book, just how relevant artificial intelligence it is and how already developed a technology it is. And what's more scary is that artificial intelligence also drives a lot of kind of information about our lives. So whenever you apply for a mortgage, there is very likely that an algorithm will kind of pull up your credit score. Or when I applied for Amazon, in fact, my CV had been screened to kind of, through the list of interview participants, to kind of sift out, whether I'm suitable candidate or not. And the problem is that we have zero idea that this stuff is happening. I never knew about those things, even though those decisions, those very significant decisions have been made about me and my life. So I think this book made me really realize that we no longer live in the world of our parents, but in fact, we are now living in a world that is really a blended reality that is curated to us by machines. So I think that was the first takeaway from the book for me, which was quite eye-opening. So artificial intelligence is not intelligent, in fact. So in the book, the author writes about the story of a horse who learned to count. So it would, a member of audience would ask a mathematical question, an equation, and the horse would tap the answer. So people puzzled about how intelligent this horse is. There was many kind of experts kind of looking at the horse and trying to understand, can a horse be intelligent? But what it turned out was that the horse was very good at reading the cues from people. So it would observe that somebody got excited when the right number was coming up, and that's when it just tapped the right number. Which meant, I guess it is a form of intelligence, but it meant it's not really such intelligent creature in a way. And the same is the case with artificial intelligence. It doesn't really think. What it does, it kind of applies statistical computations to come up with the most likely or more kind of precise outcome as defined by metrics, defined by engineers. So it's not really intelligent in the way it thinks. It's just very good at finding the right calculation. And this means that no one can really comprehend what's going on behind the scenes of an artificial intelligence algorithm, including experts themselves. So nobody really knows how it comes up with the solution, because it's, we can't comprehend that as humans. And this problem is called the black box problem, where, we have now a technology that it does all this amazing stuff, but nobody really knows how in a way. And I think that's a very scary prospect when governments and public organizations spend billions of dollars or pounds to use those technologies to try to define and classify humans and their behaviors. And I think that's quite a scary prospect. And this brings me to my next point, which is that AI is biased. So we kind of think that machines are, these purely rational systems, and they pass no judgments, they have no emotions, etc. So in theory, they should be perfectly just and, don't include any biases, but in fact, this is absolutely not true. So let's go back to this example of Amazon and when I had my CV being screened. So that has been before my time. But when Amazon started to run this algorithm, they started to realize that in fact, algorithm has put all the female candidates at the bottom of the pile. And when they started to investigate what was happening there and why this artificial intelligence was so discriminative, they realized that the system trained on the data over the last 10 years, where most of the candidates in the industry has been male, which means it assumed that, you know, females by comparison gonna be a worse candidate. So it started to discriminate. And it was the same case with the US justice system. So they experimented with automating the bail system. And very quickly it kind of came up that it would negatively discriminate against Black people, and, you know, like it would either give bigger bail or, you know, not afford it at all. So bias is built in artificial intelligence from the ground up. And I think in the tech sector, which develops artificial intelligence, is really overrepresented by white male engineers. So I think we can't really kind of expect a system designed by those people to be fully inclusive. So I guess it's, you know, about like, how do we account for those things and how do we bring more diversified kind of tech force. And I guess since nobody really questions the kind of the facts of the machine or what machines comes up with, the risk is that those biases then can really tip the structures of power and kind of magnify the injustice. So I think it's very important that we talk about those things. And on to the next slide. I also, previous slide. So I also have a physical presence. We again think about technology as this thing in the cloud, but actually it's have a very real impact on the environment. So from mining and for lithium and the kind of components used to power and, you know, build our laptops, to the kind of power grid, I suppose, of technology. So there are huge warehouses that have to be run. And it was estimated that to train an artificial intelligence system, it takes as much electrical power as a small town. And in fact, some estimates say that by 2040, technology will contribute to over 30% of all the carbon emissions. That's 1/3 of world's carbon emissions. This is crazy when we think about this computing doing their stuff, you know, disconnected from environment, but in fact, they have very physical presence. So when we talk about artificial intelligence, we can't forget about the impact on the climate as well, and the environment and the physical world that we live in. And the last takeaway. So I can't be stopped. Sorry to bring that onto you. Sentient machines are coming. But I guess I'm less worried about, you know, the the rebelling machines, but that we will build the world where we are so focused on, you know, data and productivity, and the machines are being made, the machines are making decisions about our life, you know, which is happening already. That really goes very strange, because we still don't really understand the impact artificial intelligence have on our life, socially as well, and psychologically. So AI can be good as well. I mean, it is phenomenal in, you know, finding cancer patterns or epidemiology. I mean, it's been very helpful with COVID. So there are benefits to artificial intelligence. I think it's just more about understanding the truth about technology, how having the real picture and understanding, you know, what are where is this beneficial or not, and what are the costs involved in those benefits. So I think as a society, it's very important for us to get educated and engage in this kind of conversation so that we can regulate and moderate artificial intelligence in the right way. So yeah, so I guess those are all the takeaways from me. It's early in the morning, so I don't know if I haven't traveled a little bit. So yeah, IA is here and now. I think this was the most eye-opening thing for me because I really wasn't aware of that. IA is not that intelligent also, although it seems so, and nobody really knows how it works. So we better we better start to understand it. It is biased, unfortunately, and that bias is built from ground up. It has physical presence and real impact on the environment. And although it can't be stopped, I think we can have a better conversation about it so that when we build those technologies for the future, which are here and now, we can in fact have a bit more say in what is right or wrong. So that was me. Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks, Aleks. Yeah, I've got a ton of questions on the back of that. I don't know if everyone else has, but if you have, yeah, just pop that in the chat. I'm really intrigued as how to sort of companies are, you know, attempting at least to remove bias from AI algorithms. It must be a near impossible job, but a very important one. But we will move swiftly on to our next talk, and that will be given by Danae. So Danae is an Edinburgh tech startup veteran. Is that fair to say? Veteran. Sounds,
yeah.
You're okay. You're a veteran. Having led some of the comms, led the comms and marketing teams at FreeAgent and CareSourcer. She is now co-founder and CEO of tech unicorn in the making, Vala. That's true, man.
It's true.
A startup that helps people use their legal rights. Yeah, check that out. It's a really interesting business. And she's also a very good friend of mine, which is just super. So lucky me. So Danae is today going to astound us with some mind-boggling facts about fungi by sharing the Entangled Life. Danae.
Yes, thank you very much. That was a lovely intro, Andy. Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm going to, like, I'm always excited. I'm going to try and like moderate my excitement because this book just like, it blew my damn mind. And so yeah, so Entangled Life is a book about fungi, written by the very appropriately named Merlin Sheldrake. And I encourage you after this to go to his Twitter because he acts like a Merlin Sheldrake. And in fact, one of the things that he did was he actually grew a fungi off of a copy of this book and then ate the fungi on video, which was such a Merlin Sheldrake thing to do. So yeah, this guy is really into fungi and wrote what I think is just like this, like it's like a contemplation of, like, if you go to the next slide, it's like a contemplation of all this stuff, right? So it's like I really struggled with this particular slide because it was like, what is this book about? And I was like, well, it's about mushrooms, right? And then it's also about Star Trek, and then about talking trees and plastic and queer ecology. And then by the time I kind of got like halfway through this book, like I was like, oh, this is a cool book, like, wow, facts, stuff. And then by the end of the book, I was just like, who am I? Like it just changed my worldview. So that's the way that I'm going to try to approach these 5 things. Is I'm going to start in the kind of kiddie pool side of this and just tell you about some of the cool facts. And then I'm going to move into like I'm going to try and present them in the like orders of magnitude of how much they blew my mind, the kind of different things I learned about this book. But in general, it is a book about the world of fungi that we coexist with and never really think about, never really kind of, I think we just think about mushrooms as something that you eat. And it just turns out that, well, I think one of the big things for me is just like mushrooms might be just running the whole damn show. Like it might be the mushrooms world and we're just living in it, or the fungi's world and we're just living in it. So yeah, so the first thing I learned, we're going to start easy. is a super cool thing about fungi, which is that they can actually help us deal with some of the ramifications of climate change and our terrible approach to sustainability and things like that. So there were some really cool examples in the book about there is now fungi that can be trained to eat plastic and start to address kind of like the plastic waste and things like that. And then if you think about clothes, so like all the stuff around Shane hauls at the moment and how it's like massively unsustainable to be buying all this fast fashion and things like that, people are actually developing clothing, furniture. So this furniture is made out of fungi and all kinds of other things using this as a material. So people have essentially created paper, kind of like an MDF kind of a material, and a really flexible kind of material, all out of fungi. There's one company in America who are kind of like at the forefront of this, but it's like a whole thing. And there's even houses, temporary housing and things like that that can be grown essentially. And the time it takes to actually grow a house is a matter of days rather than, you know, the time it might take to kind of mix all the concrete and things like that. So, so that's like, okay, that's like entry level mind blowing. So like, let's go up another level, right? So yeah, totally, Andy. Be right back, growing a house. Like, I need to grow a shed. My last shed is too small. I need to fit more stuff into it. That's exactly the kind of thing we're dealing with. So the next thing is, I think probably a lot of us have heard now, or if you haven't, this is another mind-blowing fact about the wood wide web, as it's called. This idea that trees can talk to each other. And they actually, through their root systems, they actually exchange information with each other and that they exchange nutrients. So, and there's even this concept of like, there's, can't remember what they're called, kind of these like central trees that have like a little kind of family of trees around them, and then any forest that you encounter, mother trees, thank you. You've got mother trees that have families around them. And so any forest that you encounter has this entire ecosystem of trees below it. And it's often presented as this kind of almost kind of utopian, quasi-communistic kind of thing that's happening in forests. And the thing that this book details is that, yeah, fungi are running that show. The trees are not like, you know, like, hey, tree over there, I'm going to give you some. No, there are fungi. So the root systems of pretty much every plant, every tree, everything that you're talking about, everything that you know, the root systems have developed a relationship with fungi to extend their ability to take nutrients out of the soil, to, I mean, and often, like if you think of the orchid, for example, orchids would not exist without fungi. They have long ago lost their ability to bring nutrients from the soil with their own roots. Every single species of orchid is completely dependent upon a fungi in order to actually exist. And these fungi, like they are actually like little stockbrokers. So they run the show. They're underneath the ground in this big mycelial network, connecting all the trees and the plants and everything else. And they're like, you know what? You need more carbon. I'm going to get some carbon. And they even do this thing where they buy low and sell high in terms of the exchange of nutrients and things like that going on. So they might say, okay, I'm going to get some carbon from you, and I'm going to give it to this tree over here because they need it. And like, it's a little like Wall Street going on underneath our feet of like actual exchanges, buying low and selling high of nutrients, of water, all this kind of stuff. But the decisions are being made by the fungi, not by the trees, which just, so it's not quite this communistic kind of society that we all kind of wish it would be. It's much more like, you know, the fungi are running the damn thing. Like, it's really amazing. and I'll come back to the communistic kind of perspective, because that is bringing our own perspective to it, which is just wrong. So yeah, okay, so that's level 2. Let's go up a level. So then when you think about that, right, so what you're really standing on when you're standing on the ground is essentially a giant brain or a giant computer, because the mycelial networks are absolutely huge. Like if you just like dig into anything, like a shovel full of dirt, you know, contains like acres worth of mycelium, like all those little networks and things like that. And they work just like computers or just like brains. So they have like decision gates. So there's a guy out there who's already building computers out of slime molds. And then you can do the same thing with fungi. It's called biocomputing. And they react to electrical impulses. They make decisions. They react to stimuli. Like it's a computer chip that's just massive and happening below our feet. And the really cool thing about this is, so you can't, like, the reactions are too slow to actually like replace silicon computers. You wouldn't create a fungi computer to, you know, like do a Zoom call or things like that. But what you could do, almost kind of avatar-like, is you could plug in to the computer that's happening below our feet, understand the signals that are happening, and then use it to understand things like what's going on with soil quality, the water table, pollution levels, all that kind of stuff. So we could start to like interface with the computers that are existing below our feet to start to understand the environments around us. And like, oh, and also, if like Avatar is a very good example for this, but Avatar was ripped off of an Ursula Le Guin book called The Word for World is Forest. So if you want to like that is an amazing short story. The Word for World is Forest, which was kind of where Avatar came from. So that's worth reading as well. Okay, so like, and this is an example, this picture is an example of how that physical manifestation of that computer with those decision gates and things like that, it's searching for food and it's reaching out in all these different directions. As soon as it finds one, it starts to cut off other aspects and then move towards the food. Just like ants or anything like that. You can read, you can make computers out of ants as well. Like there's a whole other book about that, but I'll stop there. Okay, so, okay, that's level 3 mind-blowing. Let's go to level 4 mind-blowing. Oh, sorry, I forgot about this part, go back. So if mycelial network sounds familiar, you've probably watched Star Trek Discovery, which came out a few years ago. And there's this whole, the kind of fundamental part of the plot line is that the super cool spaceship can travel through the mycelial network. That's familiar because Paul Stamets, the guy who like interfaces with it in the show, is actually named after a fungi called Paul Stamets, who was like a consultant for the Star Trek show that taught them all about the for real mycelial network. So it's like based on real life, and this Paul Stamets, the real life Paul Stamets, is like going around and trying to like spread the good word of how, like, you know, we're standing on computers and like the fungi are actually out there and they're intelligent and all this other kind of stuff. So yeah, that mycelial network is like, it's real. Well, it's not like real in the sense that you can put a starship through it, but it's based on real science, which I was just like, oh my God. Okay, level 4. So this is when you start to think about, okay, well, if there's like all this stuff happening all around us, why do we call things it, is the basic idea. And the author points out, so they quote this amazing book called Braiding Sweetgrass that I'm reading right now, written by a woman who is a member of the Potawatomi tribe in America. And one of the things that she talks about is how in her tribe's language, to describe a hill, you wouldn't say a hill, you would use it as a verb, to be a hill. And the idea, this term he used almost casually, this more than human world, really kind of hit me hard, because I was like, my goodness, we have been so like, you know, we anthropomorphize everything. We see everything through the lens of our human constructs, our, you know, like I just described the things going on as stockbrokers happening underneath the world, and not a communistic kind of perspective and things like that. But when you read this book, you really start to get the sense that we have no idea what's going on, and we're just trying with our tiny brains to kind of put them into boxes that we understand. And the incredible hubris that we have to describe a physical object as an it, as an object, when it is just as living like a hill as what we are, and how the world around us is not the Anthropocene. It's not a human-centered world. We are really just along for the ride with like all of this incredible activity that's happening around us. And a lot of the language of other cultures has always known this and reflected this. And so yeah, so that really got me. It's like the using it and kind of creating us as the living objects and turning everything else into non-living objects is just incredible hubris and just really not the reality of the world that we're living in. And then the fifth thing, which really got me, is this idea that we are all lichens. And actually we were to separate myself from the rest of the world around me is actually completely wrong. There's this amazing scientific paper out there called "We Were Never Individuals." And their basic premise is that we are all lichens. So a lichen is a organism that is a symbiosis of a fungi and a bacteria. So the two things do not exist independently. They exist as a symbiosis. And in fact, to call it something as simple as two different items kind of working together is incredibly simplistic. Like often a fungi is, or often a lichen is formed by a fungi and a bacteria, which is formed of another lichen. It's like lichens all the way down is the way that Merlin Sheldrake kind of describes this. So, and if you think about us as humans, we are lichens. We like the very basic, like if you remember biology class, they called it the powerhouse of the cell, of the cells in our body, the mitochondria. That's a bacteria. It has its own DNA. Like that, we are lichens. Like that's a little part of bacteria that decided to coexist with us and power our human cells. Like if you think about all the different biomes that we have going on in our bodies, like even when a baby is being formed in a uterus, it already has its own gut biome. That's not something that is like was human and then was human plus bacteria. The whole idea of human doesn't exist in the way that we think about it. There wasn't anything, there's no separate human plus bacteria. It's just us. We are lichens. And there's an amazing part of the book as well that then goes into, okay, well, if you then start thinking about us as not individuals, well, what are we? And the author actually goes and takes LSD as a part of kind of exploring this and starts talking about how one of the things the LSD does is it creates what they call an ego death. And you start to lose your sense of individuality and you start to get a better sense of the connection you have with the world around you. And often that's used now for treating depression and anxiety and things like that. And he goes into this like super kind of weird stuff around like, that could be the fungi trying to communicate with us is like his hypothesis at the end of that. It's like maybe by kind of altering the ways that our brain works, it's trying to show us a more fungi-like way of viewing the world. But yeah, so that's like a little aside, but super fascinating. So, and lichen, the other point that he makes is we are all lichen and we are all queer, because if you think about how lichen work and how we work, the whole idea of like this weird heteronormative binary gender frame that we kind of imposed upon the world is completely messed up. Like that's just not how reproduction works when you start to think about all these different elements that are happening inside of us and like the world and everything else. So there's another great paper, if you Google it, if you just Google lichen and queer, it goes through all the different ways that like lichen are queer, and because we are lichen, we are all queer, and you know, just does a very good job of destroying some of that gender binary thinking. Okay, so I'm going to stop. I know I'm getting really excited, so I'll just round up here. So first of all, you know, just get ready, low level, get ready for some mushroom packaging and stuff like that. It's pretty cool, like growing your own house and things like that. Number two, fungi are running the show. It's the fungi's world. We're just living in it. And he talks a little bit more about that in the book. Like, honestly, I have barely scratched the surface of mind-blowing things in this book. Number three, we're standing on giant computers or brains that are just like happening below us. And maybe one day we can learn to talk to them, either through computers or maybe through taking LSD. Number 4, that whole concept of the more than human world. I would encourage you to, after you read this book, read Braiding Sweetgrass, which I'm reading at the moment. And number 5, we have never been individuals. Like, and you can see why by the time I got to the end of this book, I was just like Zoolander style, kind of, who am I? Because it just shifted my worldview completely and just gave me a whole new frame. Like Sheldrake calls it like a fungi view of the world, but a whole new lens to view the world within, and just really expanded my kind of perspective of kind of who I was, the world that we're in, all that kind of stuff. So yes, that's me. Thank you.
Amazing, Danae. Thanks so much. I feel a bit funny now. Don't know who I am. I'm really interested in the already existing connections between the 2 talks of transplanting our human narrative in both domains of AI and just our general worldview. Be good to maybe get a bit of time to explore that at the end, but we'll move straight on to our final speaker of the day, Sath. Hey, Sath.
Hi, Sandy. Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for the warm welcome. This is my first 5 things.
Oh, welcome, Sath. So Sath operates at the intersection of engineering and agile with a focus on people, culture, and communities, having started his career as a software engineer. Does that seem a while ago, Sath?
Long time ago.
It's moved from hands-on developer into management and leadership, working with global clients and international clients, international clients and global brands, sorry. So you're a busy guy, Sath. Sath has a number of voluntary roles over and above his day job in the banking sector and is currently organizer of Future of Work Scotland, which I'd totally recommend checking out. Chair of the BCS Agile Methods group and sits on the CMI Scotland board as their communications lead. He is also an advisor, trustee and CEO of the Agile 20 Reflect Festival, a month-long program of 800 plus events celebrating 20 years of Agile. Sath is also chartered fellow of both the BCS and the CMI, and somehow he's also got time to do a 5 things. What's the deal with that? Well done, Sath. What a guy. So Sath's going to share his 5 key takeaways from Make Work Brilliant. Sath.
Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction. Yeah, I think you scared me replaying back my life there. So Make Brilliant Work. So I didn't know Rod Judkins' work. I didn't know any of his books. He's written a number of really, really good books. A bestseller called The Art of Creative Thinking, which some of you in this particular audience might have read, I would have thought. And the reason I've picked this one is because Rod's actually going to be a guest speaker later in the year at Future Work Scotland in November. So, if you like what you hear today, you're very welcome to come along and join that session and hear from the man himself. So what's the book about? So it's about a lot of things. Actually, it covers a lot of ground, a lot of really powerful ideas. But it's actually ultimately about, for me, it's about unleashing your creativity, finding inspiration and seeking inspiration. And typically, inspiration can come from anywhere and everywhere, right? And often from the most unlikely of sources. What I really like about the book is that it conveys a lot of ideas with very short sort of stories from lots of really household sort of famous names in the creative industries in the world, from painters and artists to fashion designers, film directors, you name it, they're in there. And it's fascinating to hear some of their backstories and some of the things that they overcame and their challenges, how they ended up doing some incredible work. And it really inspired me to think about some of these things and take some fresh perspective. So the book actually covers 80 of these. There's 80 of these stories, about 3 or 4 pages, right? And I rattled through, so I couldn't put it down. So I've somehow managed to select 5 of them for this session, given it's 5 things. So let's work through the ones I've picked. Hopefully they'll resonate with you as they did with me. So the first one is enjoy the lows as much as the highs. So this one's great because it's all about the fact that, often, human beings have kind of over the years evolved to train their minds to kind of take difficult situations and basically just avoid, right? But by avoiding them, we actually don't take action. So really this one's about kind of thinking about that particular idea and where we can look to overcome setbacks, etc. So this particular anecdote is about Universal Studios asking a then very young unknown film director to make what they wanted to be like an amazing film. There was a big budget. That film director was Steven Spielberg. The film's Jaws. And this was in the 70s, and most people have seen it. It's a brilliant film. And they had a lot of problems with the lead in the film. And the lead was, of course, the mechanical shark. And the shark, you know, it broke down a lot. It didn't always work. The team spent a lot of time repairing it, and this created all sorts of problems. But that wasn't the only problem. You know, the script wasn't finished when they started shooting. Richard Dreyfuss, who famously played Hooper, the oceanographer, he didn't even want the part. You know, he didn't like the script, he didn't like his character, he turned the part down several times. And this sort of stuff went on, but they had to start shooting. And Spielberg found amazing ways to kind of overcome these things. So the crew really struggled with the shark. So what kind of Spielberg did was he, as you'll remember from the film, is that the shark doesn't actually make an appearance until much later on in the film. So he kind of found clever ways to kind of reduce its appearances, because actually it looked ridiculous as well in some of the scenes, and everybody was going, oh my God, that looks rubbish. So he was very clever with that. And that helped obviously build the suspense, didn't it? Spielberg also had to kind of wrestle with the fact that, you know, when they were aware of him, the shark, what would he be doing? So what did he do? And the cast spent a lot of time perfecting the other scenes where the shark doesn't appear, right? That's why some of those scenes between the other characters are so brilliant, you know, because they had the time to perfect them. So, you know, he kind of utilized on that. Spielberg, you know, really did a great job of it in the end, as we all know. And he thought he was going to be, you know, he'd made an assumption that he was going to be recognized by the Academy when the Oscar nominations came along. So he'd actually invited a TV crew to his kind of offices to kind of film him, his reaction to the nominations being announced, but the Academy snubbed him. He didn't get recognized. So there's this famous scene apparently of him kind of holding his head in his hands. But of course, on the flip side of that, the film ended up, you know, being a kind of very famous film, made film history, and remains a classic to this day. So I think that the key takeaway from this one was that, you know what, we're all going to face setbacks. Setbacks are everywhere, but you've got to find ways to kind of overcome them. And if you can do that, you're going to do great work. But part of this is also about not just doing the work, it's building resilience along the way. And I think resilience is, you know, something that kind of again and again, especially given what we've all been through over the last 18 months with the global pandemic. Right, what have we got next? Hyper-focus in a world of interruption. I love this one. I think most of us can relate to this. This one's all about the fact that, you know what, world's moving at an insane pace, and we're constantly distracted by the modern world. We are, and it's very hard for us to kind of stay focused. But if we're going to do great work, that's exactly what we need to do. We need to find a way to kind of, you know, exercise some self-discipline. And it's up to us to make good choices about what we think deserves our attention. So that's what this one's really about. And the little story in there that I really liked was there was a chap called Kevin Plank. He was a sort of college American football player. And he basically, you know, they used to have the sort of undershirts that they wore under their kind of, you know, their padding, etc. And basically during training, they used to get soaked, drenched in sweat. He really didn't like this, so he wanted to kind of do something about it. So he went away and kind of designed something a bit lighter, something that basically kept him dry. Other players came to hear of this, they wanted it as well. So he started to manufacture this. And he actually went around the East Coast, driving around, selling them to other players, and from the back of his car. He ended up creating this company called Under Armour, which again most of us have heard of, and that was his backstory. But he was really focused on what he was trying to do, and he was really deliberate about it, and he didn't let anything distract him from his mission to, you know, turn that into what it is now. So this one's all about the fact that, you know, we have to exercise self-discipline. We have to kind of think about, you know, what should we be spending our time on. A lot of us sadly squander a lot of our time on things that ultimately end up being irrelevant. So if you really want to kind of achieve something, be true to your goals and your aims, you've got to really find that ability to hyper focus, really hone in on what you're trying to do and shut all the noise out. So I really like that because I think it's relevant to kind of most of us. And then what's next? Break free from yourself. So this kind of relates to some of the ideas that came up earlier. This one again was really, really amazing, I thought, because this one's about, a lot of us actually get defined sadly by our past. Things we've done in the past, kind of people judge us based on kind of, you know, past versions of ourselves. And there was a lady back in the 1920s called Maria Górek-Gorska. Hopefully I haven't completely made a mess of that pronunciation. And she came from a wealthy sort of Polish background. And they used to live out in Russia. And sadly, she lost everything during the Russian Revolution. And she moved to Paris. When she was there, she had this real desire to want to reinvent herself. And she wanted to be an artist. Which actually was a really brave, courageous thing to do back in the 1920s, because it wasn't a really easy occupation for women, sadly, back in that era. But she was really determined to do this. So she set out, you know, she went around the sort of art galleries of Paris, you know, built up her network, made connections, built up a really good reputation. But what she'd done is she kind of really, you know, cast off the shackles of who she was before. And completely wanted to, you know, immerse herself and become this artist. That's what she wanted to be. She felt that was her calling. She actually kind of changed her name, so she became sort of Mara di Lampica. Again, if I've got that pronunciation right. And her story of reinvention was actually a huge inspiration to many other greats that came after her, fashion designers like Karl Lagerfeld and pop icons like Madonna, who actually is apparently a collector of Lampica's artwork. But that story of, you know, thinking about, you know, who you truly are, who do you really want to be, what is your calling, really kind of resonated with me, made me think. It's a really kind of inspiring one. And a lot of us sometimes need a catalyst to kind of surface those aspects of our hidden personality. And the author himself talks about his early days in lecturing, you know, because he lectures a lot in sort of creativity in the arts. And when he first had to do that, he had to really sort of dig deep to surface a bit of his personality, to hold his own in this large lecture theatre of students, you know, who he wanted to keep their attention. So I thought that was really, really good. And I think it also makes you think about, if your circumstances really change significantly, you've got to think and act. And again, you know, think about who you really, really want to be. Next, I'm rattling through these because I'm conscious of time. So this one again really, really stunned me actually. So doing the thing you ought not to do. So there's a nice little starting bit in this one, the author's got, which is a little piece by Mark Twain. And he talks about the fact that, you know, like the world's best swordsman doesn't really need to fear the world's second best swordsman, because they're kind of in the same arena and they kind of know the discipline, the techniques, and they're experts. The world's best swordsman will more likely feel a beginner or a newbie, or somebody who doesn't really know what they're doing, because they typically end up doing what they ought not to do, and therefore they're unpredictable. And the expert doesn't necessarily know how to deal with that. So that was kind of how it kind of opens. But it then talks about a story I'd never heard before from the famous children's author Roald Dahl, who's pictured here. And he, his son was hit by a taxi in New York and suffered serious injuries. And he ended up with a brain injury where, you know, the fluid used to build up in his skull, and his skull used to swell up. And had apparatus at the time to deal with that. But it wasn't great. It was kind of clunky. It used to clog up and break down. And it used to leave the patients with, you know, in a lot of pain, and they could suffer brain damage. And Roald Dahl really didn't like this, and he wanted to do something about it. So he said, look, you know, I want to fix this. So he spoke to, you know, his son's neurosurgeon, and he basically went about trying to find a solution. So what it turned out was Roald Dahl actually had, his hobby was building sort of model aeroplanes. He was really into sort of flying these model planes, and he used his knowledge of like hydraulic pumps to start to kind of find a solution. So he worked with a neurosurgeon and somebody else who the friends with a neurosurgeon, and you know, he'd gone away and he'd done the calculations and he'd, you know, built prototypes, tested them, and was really committed to kind of solving this. Again, this was not his arena, but he brought external skill set into this domain and a fresh perspective. So that's what this really one's about. And in the end, he created the Wade Dahl Till valve, which is still widely used and has, you know, helped thousands and thousands of patients. And they patented it, but they never wanted any profit from it. But what it really says in this particular one is, you know what, you can get external perspectives and really get, you know, fresh ideas on things, and maybe you can overlook things. So if you bring in fresh perspectives from people outside of your domain, that's what you'll get, a fresh perspective. And that's what Roald Dahl brought into this equation. And also, he didn't let his lack of medical knowledge deter him, because he was able to reach out to other subject matter experts who he could collaborate with, who could make this work. So by doing that, he ended up making this huge contribution to the world. Last one. Set your sights too high. I love this. Right, so of course that's the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, and I've been there a few times. I didn't go up there because I just think it's too high, and I don't even suffer from, I'm not afraid of heights. So this one's really, again, about ambition. You know, so Rod, the author, talks about the fact that in this particular story, a friend of his who was studying, you know, art at the time, so Leeds Art University, was really sort of taken by this particular student who, you know, wasn't doing well in the course, wasn't succeeding, was getting really poor grades, and then, you know, left the course and went on to building sites, etc. And everybody felt like this guy's never going to amount to anything. And then this individual had gone and tried to get into Goldsmith University to do a fine arts degree, and he'd been knocked back several times. But what really stunned everybody was that this chap had basically set Picasso as his benchmark. It was like, yeah, that's what I want to be, because he was really sort of taken with Picasso's fame and stardom, and the fact that when Picasso went out and, you know, went for meals and signed checks, etc., people went and cashed the checks because the signature was worth more than the meal, right? And this is where this guy set his sights. That was Lever's ambition. Then he started to kind of work on his things. He started to, you know, do some more creative, inventive work, and Goldsmiths accepted him. He went on to do really well. This individual was Damien Hirst. And Damien Hirst is, of course, you know, a very famous name in the world of art, and, you know, one of the, you know, the finest in his generation. But what was really important about this was it was Damien's ambition, you know, that really fueled his energy and drove him to achieve his goals. Because often, you know, if we have really lofty goals, our friends and family go, that's unrealistic, mate, come on now. You know, but him, by doing that, really being stuck and focused on that, he achieved great things. So yeah, this one I thought was very inspiring, and the one I'd like to close with. So there are only 5 of them. There are 80 of these, and they are amazing stories from people from across these arts industries. So yeah, just to quickly recap, enjoy the lows as much as the highs. Things are a roller coaster. You can learn a lot from the troughs as much as the peaks. We've got to focus. That's really difficult. Most of us do get distracted. I'm guilty of it myself. Put the phone down, shut yourself out, focus on what you really want to do. Yeah, be true to who you are. Have you found yourself? What's your true calling? Explore that. Go on that journey of discovery. And yeah, be brave, be courageous. You know, do the things maybe people don't expect you to do. Take your own skill set and take it into other domains and bring a fresh perspective. And yeah, be ambitious. Set your sights high, 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 high. And then you just never know what you might achieve. And that's my takeaway.
Thanks, Seth. Oh, that was wonderful, wonderfully inspiring as well. Really like setting your sights too high as well. Maybe it's like a sort of British thing to go, no, it's too high. Get back in your lane. But no, go for it. And yeah, you said that the author will be joining you later in the summer. Is that right? Or summer later in the year. Summer's well truly done, isn't it?
I think I'm back on mute. I've shared the I'm just about to share I'll share the meetup link in the chat. So you're all welcome if you want to come along and hear from Rod Judkins. He's had an amazing life. He's a very inspirational guy, and it's an amazing read. I mean, I couldn't put it down. One of the best things I've read in 2021.
Great, thanks for that, Seth. Well, just a final round of applause for our 3 speakers. Hopefully the promise of the start of the talk were, you know, inspired to pick up a book, or what did I say? I can't even remember. Either leave the place, you know, leave today a bit smarter, or inspired to pick up one of the books, or just feeling a spot better or more mind blown about the world. I don't know how you feel, but hopefully one of those goals is met. Unfortunately, we've not got time for questions. There's if I was to summarize sort of my key takeaways, at least from the first two talks, is the sort of one of the biggest problems is how we sort of break free of imposing sort of human narratives. I think, as Phil sort of commented in the chat, I think it's probably one of the biggest dangers that you know, maybe present for the yeah, how we go about our how we live. Anyway, waffle. Yeah, I think we're going to sort of finish up there. Unfortunately, I quite like to sort of end on questions, but the talks are so mind-blowing that we'll have to leave that for another day. Yeah, we'll hopefully do this again next month, so hopefully you can join us then. I'll likely email you or spam you on one medium or another. But yeah, hopefully you have a nice day. I'm personally going to try and become one with fungi. I think sort of tap into the computer that lives underneath all of us. But yeah, thanks so much, folks.
Thank you, Andy.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye
Good to be
bye.
here.
Bye.
Thank you.